On February 13, 2021, an outstanding Soviet athlete and Olympic weightlifting champion Yuri Vlasov passed away at the age of 86. You are probably wondering now, why did I decide to make a whole video about it? It's simple. The biography of this man is so extraordinary that I had to share his life story with you. Judge for yourself. As a child, he went through years of hunger in an evacuation in Siberia, and at 17 his father was allegedly murdered on the orders of the most evil person of the Soviet Union. By 26 he had set more than 30 world records in weightlifting and drank vodka with Yuri Gagarin and Fidel Castro. And at 30 he quit sports at his peak to become a journalist and a writer. At 38 he became the main voice of Soviet propaganda in their conflict with Mao Zedong. And at 49 he made a denouncatory speech against Mikhail Gorbachev and the KGB. Finally, at the age of 61, he took part in the wildest and most interesting presidential elections in Russian history as a candidate for president of Russia. And all of this was done by one man, Yuri Vlasov. It is really hard to believe that all this was happening to one person, that one man can achieve such notable success on three fronts at once: sports, literature and politics. But first things first, who was Yuri Vlasov? Yuri's childhood was far from easy. And this was despite the fact that his father was a very prominent man, the recipient of several orders of the Red Star, the Order of Lenin and the Order of the Red Banner. Vlasov's father spent World War II in China, where he officially worked as a representative of the TASS, and unofficially headed a special group on collecting information about the Kwantan Army. Yuri and his mother were evacuated to western Siberia, to the banks of the Oby River. He lived near a hospital for the war wounded. There was a severe famine in those areas. The wounded did not have enough food. Yuri himself and his family were also starving. So badly that in 1943, at the age of 8, he partially went bald from hunger. Let me remind you, it is the future Olympic champion in weightlifting we are talking about. Imagine how much stronger he would have been if nothing had impeded his development as a child. However, Yuri managed to overcome these difficulties, and already in 1953 he became a star student of the Saratov Military School. But unfortunately, his father was not able to witness it. In 1946, after the war, he became a general counsel of the USSR in Shanghai, and in 1952 he was summoned to Moscow to the office of Lavrentiy Beria, who congratulated him on his appointment as Soviet ambassador to Burma. Beria invited him to his office and offered to give him an anti-cancer vaccine right here and then. An injection against cancer in the 50s. Few weeks later, Vlasov Sr. was brought to the hospital with a severe throat bleed. He died according to the official report of lung sarcoma at the age of 47. This is how Beria took revenge on him for his long-standing refusal to work with the NKVD. Yuri Vlasov wanted to follow in his father's footsteps, and in 1953 he moved to Moscow, enrolling at the Zhukovsky Military Aircraft Engineering Academy to become an aviation radio engineer. But his talent was quickly noticed there too, and he was sent to compete in the nationwide sports competitions. At the same time, Yuri himself hated weightlifting. What can be fascinating in the monotonous pumping of muscles? What a mind one must have to find pleasure in these brute and dumb exercises. He was more interested in literature. Already during his academy years he wrote several short stories, though he did not publish them. But he still wanted to be the best in everything. In 1957 he broke his first USSR record, and it became clear that he simply would not be allowed not to develop his talent further. 2 years later, Yuri graduated with honors from the academy and went to the World Championships for the first time as the USSR champion. Naturally, he instantly became the best in the world. He went to the 1960 Olympics as the flag bearer for the USSR national team, and of course, he got his gold medal there, breaking 3 world records in the process. He would have a total of 31 world records, but that's not really the most interesting part of the story. At the 1961 World Cup in Vienna, Vlasov was an icon. Among the fans who came to see him was a kid, who doubted that one day he would become someone like Vlasov. His coach pushed the boy towards Vlasov when the champion was resting between approaches, and they talked for a few minutes. This conversation would impress the little skinny Austrian boy so much that when he came to Moscow in 1988 as an international superstar to take part in the shooting of the Red Heat, he had only two requests. The first was to buy a fur coat for his wife, and the second was to meet Yuri Vlasov. Ani was terribly pleased to meet his childhood idol and said that it was Vlasov who inspired him to never give up. Well, 1961 was actually a very interesting year for Yuri. First, he met with the most famous Yuri in the world, Yuri Gagarin, at a dinner party in the Kremlin, and then at another party in Cuba, he met Fidel Castro. Fidel at that moment was not the biggest fan of the Soviet Union, and was not treating their delegation very well. Vlasov did not like it. And at that moment he turned to me and started groping my muscles. I did not like it, so I took him by the armpits, lifted him and moved away. And he was a big guy, around 19 kilos. Fidel got all worked up, held a grudge. In those years Vlasov was the idol of the Soviet people, probably second only to Gagarin. Olympic champion, qualified engineer, Soviet army officer, journalist, the perfect man. But of course it was hard to combine all of this, and it was necessary to give something up. And in 1964 Yuri gave up sports. Gave it up in the same year when he broke 10 world records. But lost his second Olympic gold medal to Leonid Zhabotinsky. Many people think that Zhabotinsky won by using not very sportsmanlike tactics. However, 3 years later, Vlasov came back for one final attempt, and how? In 1967, needing money, he broke his last world record at the Moscow Championships after a 3-year hiatus, and got 850 rubles, which he spent on his literary work. He devoted the next 7 years of his life to a monumental work, in which he collected and processed the diary notes of his father. The latter shone a light on the dark side of Mao Zedong, with whom he communicated personally. This book was so important for Soviet Union that the head of KGB, Yuri Andropov, personally supervised it. The book, called The Vladimirov Diaries, was published in 1973 with 150,000 copies. It was translated to several languages and was republished many times. This book was a major instrument in the fight between Soviet Union and China for the right to be called the main communist country in the world. The fight that actually ended only after the death of Mao Zedong and Leonid Brezhnev. This book was also a kind of memorial to Vlasov's father, the man who warned the USSR that Japan was ready to go to war with them, right after the fall of Stalingrad. However, working on the book had an interesting effect on Vlasov. It changed him. He developed a hard, uncompromised stance. Vlasov did not tolerate abuses of power, because of which the common people suffered. Therefore, his further works became more and more antagonistic to the government. They were not approved by the censorship agency, so he was able to publish them only during Perestroika. The Soviet authorities made Vlasov a persona non grata for 10 years, simply erased his name from the chronicles, as if he had never been the strongest man in the world. But he returned, came back, survived a very difficult spinal surgery in Austria, and decided to devote himself to one more cause – politics. Spring 1989. Vlasov, already a famous writer, became a candidate for the position at the Congress of People's Deputies of the USSR. And in June, he made a famous denouncing speech against CPSU and KGB at its very first session in the presence of Mikhail Gorbachev. First of all, Vlasov was furious with the way ordinary people in the USSR were treated. He said that Soviet Union proclaimed grand principles, but in fact just exploited its people. That people are sick and tired of the promises of a better tomorrow and just want changes. But the bravest statement was his public criticism of KGB. Before him, no one dared to act so boldly against the most powerful and dangerous structure of the entire Soviet Union. In the autumn of '89, Vlasov voluntarily left CPSU after more than 30 years of service. Then the Soviet Union collapsed and Boris Yeltsin came to power. At first, Vlasov supported him, but then quickly realized that after the regime change, common people continued to suffer. In 1992, in his article Twilight of Democracy, he wrote that post-perestroika reforms only led to the plundering of the people. Vlasov thought that total destitution of the people, unemployment and uncontrolled growth of prices will lead to a ruthless revolt that will sweep away Yeltsin and all those who stand behind him. Vlasov's views in the early 90s were increasingly close to national patriotism, and the former weightlifter was quite often accused of excessive Russophilia and even nationalism. And Vlasov, once again being a State Duma deputy, decided to change Russia for the better himself. Decided to take part in the upcoming presidential elections of 1996. And he failed miserably. The main ideologist of Vlasov's candidacy was another nationalist writer, but a much more controversial one, Eduard Limonov. He promoted Vlasov in every way. He sought sponsor help among business acquaintances, even almost recruited Schwarzenegger for an advertising campaign. Only the actor's agent got in the way. He organized large rallies in his support. But Vlasov did not really like the fact that many of Limonov's supporters were blatant radicals. Well, skinheads. Therefore, on May 11th, 2 months before the elections, Vlasov named himself the candidate from the Patriotic Party of Russia, and not from the nationalists. Limonov was outraged by this betrayal, and radical nationalists decided not to vote for Vlasov. In upcoming elections he only got 0.2%. Only vodka king of the 90s Vladimir Brentsalov and Aman Tuleev, who dropped out of the election in favor of Yeltsin, had worse results. Vlasov insisted that during the election campaign he was invited to President Hotel several times. That's where Yeltsin's headquarters were situated. He was offered a place of a candidate who can play spoiler and take away some votes from communists and Gennady Zyuganov. Take them away and then give them to Yeltsin in the second round. Vlasov refused. Then, 2 weeks before the elections, one of the Yeltsin's multi-million circulation election newspapers was published with the obituary that Vlasov had died. After these elections, Vlasov realized just how dirty politics really is, and decided to leave it. He left his job as a state deputy, stepped away from public activity to concentrate on journalism. Yuri Vlasov lived to 86 years of age and had an amazingly eventful life. The title of Olympic champion in Rome, his faithful admonition to Arnold Schwarzenegger, his epic duel with Zhabotinsky in 1964, his crucial book The Vladimirov Diaries, his courageous speech at the First Congress of People's Deputies of the USSR, controversial election of the Russian president. He was a monument, a phenomenon for Russia, and not only in sports. He had strong views and many people didn't like them, but he stood by them to the end, albeit not always successfully.